5 years ago, when I was 19 years old, I went bowling one night with 3 of my friends. I was in my hometown, and I lived with my parents in a suburban neighborhood. My friends and I all drove separately, and we met up at a popular bowling alley in our city. Most of us had gone there since we were little kids, and we spent lots of time there. Plus, we were all pretty good at bowling as well. I got to the bowling alley that night at about 8 p.m., and we started bowling shortly after. I think we bowled like 5 games or so, and I was having a really good night. I scored over 200 twice, and I won the last game. By the time we were done, I would say it was between 10 and 11 p.m. The bowling alley was still pretty busy at that point, and there were lots of other people there pretty much the whole night. Sometimes my friends and I would hang out late into the night, but on this particular one, we all decided to go our separate ways afterwards. We split up in the parking lot after leaving the bowling alley, and we all went to our vehicles. I remember that I started driving home, and I noticed the car behind me was following me when I was about halfway back. Now, I automatically assumed that this was one of my friends. It was nighttime, so I couldn't exactly tell what kind of car was behind me, but I saw the headlights. I took some quieter roads to get back, and the car would make whatever turn I did. A couple of my friends did live in the general area, but by this point, they would have turned off onto other roads. My friends and I all joked around a lot, and did like to pull little pranks on each other like any friend group would, so I wasn't concerned at all. By the time I made it to my street, I was laughing because the car behind me was still following me. I didn't know which one of my friends it was, but I was sure it was one of them. I drove to my house and then pulled into the driveway. The car behind me did not pull into my driveway, but stopped right in front of it, blocking the whole width. I then got out of my car and actually started to walk over to the other car, but that's when I realized that this car did not belong to any of my friends. It was a red, smaller SUV. It was rusty and appeared to be sort of old. I stopped and then got a bad feeling, wondering why somebody had followed me all the way back to my house. The car remained running, and I couldn't see inside of it. I then felt that I just wanted to get inside my house, and as I began to back away, I saw the driver's door of the car start to open. A man then walked around the front side of the car and started walking in my direction. He immediately started yelling. The man was cursing at me and walking extremely fast. He was tall and wore a gray sweatshirt and jeans from what I saw before turning around and sprinting to the front door. The man started sprinting after me as well. When I got to the front door, I tried the knob, and thank goodness the door was unlocked. I made it inside and then slammed the door and locked it behind me. I did that with maybe 5 seconds to spare before the man reached it and tried to enter. He kept on yelling and then started banging on the door. I had absolutely no idea what he was so mad about or what he wanted. I couldn't make out most of the words that he was saying now that I was inside, and he was still out there. But most of what he said just seemed to be cursing at me or yelling general threats like, "I'm gonna get you." I grabbed my phone and called the police. My parents came downstairs a short time later after hearing all of the commotion. They saw the guy at the front door, but he didn't stay there for long. Soon, the man moved over to our front window and tried looking inside, and then banged on that a few times. After that, he ran back to his car and sped away. Unfortunately, he left before the police got there, and when they did, all I was able to do is tell them my story and a basic description of the guy and his car. I didn't have any good details about his face or anything like that. Plus, I didn't get the license plate of his car. I'm just happy that I didn't see the man again after that. To this day, though, I don't know why he followed me or was so mad. I thought about it over and over again, if I had accidentally cut him off while driving, or if I had done anything at the bowling alley that would have made him mad, but I couldn't think of anything. Maybe he had mistaken me with somebody else. Either way, there's no reason to act like that, and hopefully that guy didn't do something like that again. This story takes place back when I used to work at a bowling alley a few years ago. I did a little bit of everything while working there, and got to know most of my coworkers pretty quickly. It was a fun place to work for me personally, because it was a nice bowling alley, and I liked to bowl myself. I also liked most of my coworkers, but then this one guy got hired. It was about a month and a half after I had gotten hired. The guy's name was Jeremy, and he was a total jerk. I'm not even sure how he got the job in the first place, but from the first time I worked with him, I knew that he was trouble. He was always slacking off and lazy. For example, when he was supposed to be working behind the counter, every time I looked at him, he would be on his phone, and would occasionally just go into the back and customers would have to wait for him. Other times, when he was given tasks to do, he would either not do them at all or take forever to get them done. He also wasn't all that friendly, and you could just tell that he didn't want to be there. I know that only like a week after he got hired, our boss brought him into his office and had to talk to him. After that, he was a little bit better for a few days, almost a week, but quickly went right back into his old ways. It was obvious to everyone that he wouldn't last very long working there. After maybe 3 weeks total, he was fired, and I don't think any of us were surprised. Apparently, he had just left work with almost 2 hours left in his shift with no warning, and then he showed up late the next day. I know I was glad when he was gone, because I was tired of the rest of us having to pick up his slack. Anyways, things went back to normal for about a week after Jeremy was let go. I would work almost 4 days a week at that time, give or take. One time, it was a quieter night and nearing the end of my shift. The bowling alley had 24 lanes, a bar, an area to get food, and a little mini arcade. There were also tables set up all around. When we were nearing close, and there were only a couple of people left still bowling, I went into the little area behind the lanes. I went there for just some basic maintenance, and it was a little bit messier back there. There were some various equipment and boxes in the area. I only intended to be back there for probably about a minute or so, and then go back. But as I was back there, I heard a noise almost immediately. I walked over to examine where I had heard the noise coming from. We had almost like a long countertop back there, and then some storage underneath and storage cabinets above. At first, I saw nothing, but then I realized that somebody sort of appeared to be hiding underneath the countertop area and behind a box. The box was much smaller than they were, and that's how I was able to see. I stopped and looked at them for a moment, and I could tell that it was Jeremy. I turned around and walked back to the door, out of there, and back into the bowling alley. I'm not sure if he had seen me or not, but I don't really think he did. I wondered why Jeremy was hiding back there, but I knew that it wasn't good. I don't think he was supposed to be here at all. When I left the room, I went back and found one of my coworkers and told her that I had seen Jeremy hiding back there. She suggested that we tell our boss, and that's exactly what we did. Our boss, Dave, then decided to open the door and yell to Jeremy to leave. What happened next was Jeremy yelling at him and threatening him. The police ended up getting called, and the entire bowling alley pretty much went into a lockdown. Jeremy never left the back area, but all of us had to go into a different small back room and lock the door. The police arrived, and when I found things out afterwards, they were much worse than I thought. Jeremy had gone back to the bowling alley and hid in that back area behind the lanes, waiting for Dave to go back there at the end of the night. That's something that Dave would always do after we closed. I guess he had planned to attack him there, to get revenge for being fired. Jeremy was kind of a troubled guy, and I hope that he got some help. It's a good thing that I had spotted him in there when I did, or who knows what would have happened. I'm also glad that Jeremy didn't choose to come out and attack me instead. A couple of months ago, I went to a bowling alley with my best friend Christine. Something very bizarre and suspicious happened that night. We got to the bowling alley at about 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. It was pretty busy when we arrived, and we had to wait about 10 minutes for a lane to open up. At last, we were able to bowl. In the process, though, maybe 20 minutes in, is the first time that I noticed these two guys just kind of staring at us from afar. They were both standing, and at like a back wall. That was fine, because maybe they were just watching us bowl. But later on, in between games, as we both sat there for a minute or so, I glanced over to see them still there. They were still looking at us. Now, it wasn't super obvious because of how busy the place was, but I was able to see it. I told Christine, and she agreed that it was strange, and she herself had noticed them as well. We both went on with our next game. About 10 minutes later, when I looked back, the men were gone. I was glad to see that, and we didn't see them for the rest of the time that we were bowling. We probably bowled for another hour or so after this, and finally left the bowling alley at about 10:30 p.m. We got to the front doors and walked out to my car. I had driven us both there, and as soon as I saw my car, I saw the guys again. They weren't facing us, and instead seemed to be looking at my car. They were both right next to it though, and there was no way that I would be able to get inside of it without walking past them. There was one man at each side, and there was no mistaking them for just going to the car next to mine or something like that. Christine and I stood there, a pretty far ways away. We didn't want to walk up to those men in the parking lot at night. Who knows if they were dangerous or what? After standing there for maybe 10 seconds, and the men facing away standing next to my car, we decided to go back inside of the bowling alley. Our hope was that the men, whoever they were, would go away within a couple of minutes. We went back into the bowling alley and sat at a table near the door. Christine and I went back and forth wondering who those men were and what they were doing. We sat there talking for maybe 10 minutes and then decided to go back out and check. When we did, we couldn't see the men anywhere and nobody seemed to be around my car. We both walked out to my car, quickly got inside of it, and then locked the doors. Finally, we felt safe again, and I started my car and began to drive away. As I was driving down a quiet road, less than a mile from the bowling alley, I realized that one of my tires was going flat, and it was going flat at a really fast rate. Within no time at all, I could barely drive it, and I had to pull over to the side of the road. The roads were all very quiet now, and seldom were there any other cars on there at this time of night. After my car came to a stop, we saw headlights of a car coming up behind us almost immediately. They seemed to slow down, and then they stopped a ways back on the side of the road behind us. We were hoping that it was police, but we didn't see any flashing lights. It also didn't really look like a police vehicle from what we saw. We saw and heard the 2 front doors to the car opening. Then, 2 men stepped out and began approaching us. Immediately, Christine and I both knew these had to be the same guys. They slowly walked closer and closer to us. It was then that I noticed a car appeared to be starting to come from the other direction on the road. I don't know why, but I just decided to get out of my car. I was desperate. I left my car and ran out into the other lane. As the car started to approach, I waved my arms around like crazy for them to stop. The car first honked several times as it slowed down, but eventually it did come to a stop. The 2 men, I noticed, withdrew and were almost back at their car by now. I was yelling for help, and the car had stopped, rolled down their windows, and a guy asked me what the problem was. I told them that the men in the car back there were after us, and I asked them to call the police. The driver seemed confused, but did call the police like I asked him to. The men behind me then got back inside of their car, made a U-turn, and sped out of there. I then went back inside my car and waited with Christine. The police arrived a short time later and took down a report of what happened. We had to get a tow, but made it back safe that night. The car was an easy fix, and it was suspected that the men cut my tire to strand us. I'm really grateful that the other car drove down the road when they did. I don't know what those men wanted. Christine and I have bowled again multiple times since then, but we go to a different bowling alley now.